This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And I am going to introduce you to another podcaster. I have connected with him through a group called Podmatch.com. His name is Brent Cassity, and you seem to have been on a long journey. So give us a little bit of background.
Very true, Karen. Quite a journey. I appreciate you having me on.
Sure.
Yeah, so I've been a little busy lately. I'm getting ready to, the book Nightmare Success is getting ready to launch. Actually, the typesetting I looked at yesterday, so they're getting ready to print the thing, which have you done a book, Karen?
I've thought about it,
I got to
but haven't done it.
It is such a strange journey because when you write a book, you're kind of out on an island for a while because, is anybody going to like this? And what I'm writing making any sense? And then, you start giving it to some people and they say, oh no, keep going with that. That's good. That's good. And so then you finally get to the end of it and you're like, yes. And then it's okay, now what? And the whole process of going through, I think I spent 6 months with the editor from February to August working on that part. And that's just painstaking because you're taking because I just wrote and then, you got to edit and take
Right.
it, take it down to what it's supposed to be, whatever. But I'm excited about that. It's a memoir and it's, interestingly enough, my life has, many people would read this book as some kind of raucous Midwest family who came from the farm and had it all and lost it all. And it's just a beach read, which it could be that, but it's really more of people who have gotten to the point where they don't think a second chance is possible, or they're stuck with the idea that they have potential, whether it's a bad marriage, bad job. When obstacles come up in your life, how do you get over the top, around it, step through it? And that's really the Nightmare Success part of that is how do you handle when your worst fear becomes your reality?
Absolutely.
How do you deal with that? How do you survive that? How do you adapt to that? And what I want to do with the experiences I've had, to be able to use that experience to, it helps me to talk about it, but also helps, I think, other people to think, oh, well, I don't have to go to prison, but I am stuck in this situation. And people are a lot more adaptable than they think they are. One thing I know is that I had a really great life and I had some things I had to deal with in going to prison. And none of those things are ever as bad as you think they're going to be. Your mind makes things into being so monstrously horrible that once you start stepping into it, you can realize that you can get through it.
And, we were talking about this on a previous podcast this morning, that sometimes we just get so into our head that we start thinking so far in advance that we don't take what's right in front of us right now.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge problem because we become worrywarts and we make it worse. Although when I started reading some of the snippets on your information, it was like, prison, just the word makes you want to say, wow, like, how do you handle it? How do you handle that?
It kind of takes your breath away. And the podcast that I'm doing is called Nightmare Success In and Out. And I thought a long time about what would I do on a podcast? What do I want to talk about? What do I want to share with people? And the idea of the podcast is actually, how do you deal with your worst fear becoming your reality? And what I'm doing is I'm talking with the guys I was with at Leavenworth, and we talk about life before prison, life in prison, and life out of prison. And, for the most part, there's going to be inspiring stories. There'll be sad, there'll be some humor, but mostly what I want is people to take nuggets of something away that say, you know, I could actually use that, push that into my own life, and maybe make a little tweak here and see what could happen.
And that's what avoid the mazes, you know, as we go through life, you know, a lot of us go through life with blinders on, and then we make a mistake and we have no idea how it caught up with us because we didn't think it was a mistake.
It's a blind
Um,
spot.
Yep, absolutely. And just like you, it's like, what did I learn from this? How can I go forward? I don't have to be stuck in this dark hole.
Right.
And I'm assuming that there are some people who do go to prison who end up and say, you know, my life is basically over. You know, what have I done?
For a lot of things, prison is a life sentence because, you know, I think 2/3 go back in 3 years and 3/4 go back in 4 years or 5 years. And, you know, you say, well, how can that be? Why is that? Well, there is a couple of reasons why. Some of it's already built in. When you get out, you need a place to live, you need a job, and mostly maybe a car to get around or credit. And all three of those things you can be discriminated against because you have to put on the box and check it. That's a hard interview. So the three things that you need the most are the hardest to get, unless you have a good support network, friends who believe in you, and they want to give you a helping hand and give you an opportunity, because that's really what you're looking for when you get out. There's, you know, for the most part, there's 25 million ex-felons out in the United States. There's 2.5 million incarcerated, but there's a lot of people just from that 25 of families and people that are associated with all that. So it's a big group. But, you know, what I found by being in part of that world was most of these guys are good guys. They got into the wrong situation. You know, for a lot of situations, the guys I was with that were drug dealers, if they would have been operating on the business side of the business world, they had distribution down, they had commissions down, they had training down, all the things that you do to build a business. They were just doing it on the wrong side of the world. You know, that's the thing that I see is we're losing the potential of these minds if they could get out into the market so they didn't feel like that they had to fall back into the wrong side. That could make a difference. It really could.
So one of the things I just noticed when you put up your hand, you've got a wedding band on.
Yes.
So were you married before you went to prison?
Yes. And I got to tell you, Karen, I've got a great wife. You know, we've got 3 beautiful girls, 29, 27, 24, all accomplished. I'm so proud of them. And I went through this very public fall with my dad and my mom and my brother, who were all part of this public of this family business. And it was a long drawn out public spectacle for, you know, a good 5-6 years, and a long battle. And my daughters were, I guess the baby would have been a young teenager, and but teenagers. And I really just took this on. It was very transparent from the very beginning. I don't want you to look at the news. I don't, with the narrative set, we're going to deal with this. We've got family, we've got friends. We're going to survive. And we took on this whole thing as survivors, stepping one step. And there's about 435 inmates at Leavenworth. And I had a wife that kept me plugged into the outside world by coming every weekend. The girls were on the way in college, at one time high school, but mostly as it went along in the years in college, so she could pick them up on the way. But those visits were so important because when you have a visit when you're in prison, it's like you get to straddle the fence to the outside world to stay plugged in. And, you know, Julie and I have known each other since I'm 54 now. I met her when she was 13, I was 15. So we've gone through every life stage together. Sure. And we had a wonderful life. I mean, we were living a, you know, what you dreamed to have. You know, we had a great house, and we had a great vacation home, and the kids all came to the house, and, you know, all things were good. Life was good. And then it wasn't. And it was really something how I feel like Julie was the glue that kept everything together. And so when I came out, we had been, hey, we had created our own way
Sure.
to stay within our own marriage, and we made it out. And we as a family felt a sense of accomplishment that we made it, because so many families get so torn up in the process of this. And I saw it, I lived around it, and it's very sad to see somebody, you know, prison is a bad place. It's a lot worse when you're all alone. And so I was very lucky in that sense. I had very strong family unit, and that was always something that we leaned on each other and made it work.
And I think that's a really important message for us to, convey to the listeners, because every once in a while you'll see on the news somebody who's been in prison wrongfully. They've been there for a very long time. But when they get out, their whole family is there cheering them on. Their whole family was there all the time. And as an outsider, if you don't really understand what prison life is and what it means when somebody goes to prison, you're sitting there going like, would I have waited? Would I have been that supportive? But
Well,
if you believe in
that's a good
somebody,
question, Karen.
yeah,
And I think that the other thing that you have to do, that I think is important to do, is you need a strategy. And I'm actually talking about what I talk about the 5 rules that helped me adapt and survive prison, but those were actually the rules I used when I was trying to build a company. But they became very meaningful to me when I stepped inside a prison, and when you don't know anything and the world that you're stepping into is scary because it's new, unfamiliar. We do that all the time and outside of prison, but when you step into prison, it's a little bit more magnified. But I had these 5 rules, and they're pretty basic, but they kept me being me in my world. And number 1 was humble yourself and ask for advice. Find the people who are getting along, doing it right, or look like they're getting along better than others. Talk to them. And I'm saying this works in prison, but it works when you're getting into a new job or you're in a new place. If you just humble yourself, look around, don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just find out who's making it work and talk to them about it. And then you can implement what they're doing and it'll start working for you. The second thing was, just in my real world, business world, and then I went into the prison world, I needed to have real life goals. I had to have a plan. What am I going to do? So I actually, the first night I was there, I actually wrote down by the bathroom light that was coming through, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this work? And I wrote these 6 things down and what I was going to accomplish in this prison environment. And then for those who've seen Shawshank Redemption, there's something that I think is so meaningful in that movie, and it's a fictitious movie, but there's so many elements of it. Andy Dufresne is an innocent man who's in prison, and he, in his mind, has this Zawantaneo, the bluest of the ocean blue, the boat that he sees that he wants to fix up and take out on fishing expedition. And he's got this old motel that he's going to have and fix up. It's all in his mind. And for 19 years, he chips through this wall every night.
Right.
He rewards himself every day by putting holes in his pockets and lets out that wall. And it's so important that for me, you have a goal, you have a plan, you write it down, and you move. take action with it, move. The third thing is that there's bad days in prison. Hard days in prison. You miss things in the outside world. You might miss a graduation. Somebody might have died. There's all kinds of things that you feel that much more claustrophobic when you're in the walls of prison. But I always thought, if you try to win the day, something's got to make it work. It's one day at a time. You can't look 3 years or 4 years out. That's about the most depressing thing to do, but you probably shouldn't do that anyway. One day at a time. How am I doing today? Am I staying on what I said I was going to do? Unfair things happen. So move on, make a difference regardless. And so I wrote in my calendar every night before I went to bed. And so if I had a bad day, I knew I wasn't going to make it 2 bad days. So if I was writing down in this and I had a bad day, I was going to have to make something to win the day tomorrow. But the thing is make a difference, try to stay on your own plan. The fourth thing was, don't just beat yourself up so bad that learn from your mistakes. They don't define you, but they do make you wiser. Let that happen. Let it make you wiser. Don't get so far down the drain that you made a mistake. What can you do not to make it again? And what can you do to become a wiser person?
Absolutely.
It'll make you feel better. And the final thing for me was maybe the biggest thing. Don't give in. Don't give up. Keep being yourself regardless of the circumstances. Otherwise, you'll lose what makes you, you. And for me, being in prison, I didn't feel like that was my place to live, but I felt like if I was not going to get institutionalized and get into these ruts of these bad routines, what makes Brent, and then be me. Don't turn into some prison creature. Be me. Right. And go forward. And to me, again, that's still outside of prison. Whatever circumstance you get into, don't lose yourself. Stay within you with whatever situation you have, and you'll probably be okay. It's when you start stepping out into these weird worlds and start acting and performing differently that you lose you, and that's not good.
And we talk about how society sort of grabs us and wants us to be somebody else. And I know women go through this a lot, especially, if you wear your hair this way, if you wear this makeup, if you wear this dress, if you lose X amount of pounds, and we're always trying to be somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I know I spent a good portion of my life that way. I'd look in the mirror in the morning and I'd say, hey, I look fine. I'd get to work. Oh, she looks better than me. What could I do to look like her? And sometimes I'd ruin my day because I was in my head.
Yeah.
And it was about 10 years ago that I woke up one morning and I said, why do I have to be her? Yeah. Why can't she be me?
Yeah.
And
I love it.
And it changed my whole lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I hear what you're saying, that if you can be yourself, okay, something got you in there. Yes, maybe you took a wrong turn.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody pushed you and you took that wrong turn. But whatever it is, now you're here and you've got to find a way to deal with it. And I like how you say that this happens in our daily life, and it's true. Not every day is a good day.
No.
And if we can
yeah. And Karen, the thing about that is, I think it's real. I've got 3 daughters, so they're living in that world. We live in a really tough world now with Instagram and Facebook, because we don't give ourselves a break. Everybody's living their best life. They're at their best restaurant. They're at the best birthday party. They're at the best vacation. So nobody sees the real world. They just think they're missing out because everybody else is living this world, and it's not true. And I so think about, I was a 70s kid and went to high school in the 80s, and boy, life was easier. You didn't have any of that, but you didn't worry about any of that either.
Well, I mean, you had it, but at a much lower scale. You didn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't thrown in front of you 24/7.
No.
And my youngest son, who is 31, um, he was a 90s kid, and he thought everybody had it so much better than him.
Mhm.
And my husband and I did our best. We gave up a lot of things so he could be on an equal level, but he
Yeah.
never felt it. And he finally said to us the other day, you know what? I probably had a better life than most of my friends
Mhm.
because I saw you and dad struggle.
Yeah.
Now I know what it means. And I just looked at him and I said, well, they told me you'd mature at some point. So
What a
congratulations.
nice thing for a
Yeah.
son to say to the
I
mom.
mean, and it took a lot of that off our shoulders, that
Yeah.
we know that we were doing the right thing. Um, but sometimes, and we can get into this if you want, but here you were in business thinking you and your family were doing all the right things.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, you did something that wasn't right.
Yeah.
So when you got confronted with this, I mean, what did that do to you?
Well, it was really tough, Karen, because it was a family business. So I wouldn't recommend that for too many people, family business. We as a family did well working together because we did different things. I really liked marketing and operations, building the sales company. I loved operating our cemeteries that we had. My brother was more on the technology side. And my dad was really a finance guy. He always traded. He was wickedly smart. He graduated #1 in his law school class, and he's just I idolized him. I couldn't believe how smart he was. I was always trying to impress him and, show him, that I belonged in his arena.
Sure.
But what happened in my world is that I never was interested in the finance side, but I should have been, because to me, I was building a company on this side, and that was just the necessary evil of that was the insurance company, the necessary to put it there, that funded what I did. And I mean, I took political science theater in college to stay away from math. So I really didn't like math. And I've got my youngest daughter who's a math teacher in high school. So God only knows how that happened. But so how things came crashing down is that my dad, when I was 15 years old, he was a young 30 something that was, invincible, invisible, and brilliant. And he got in trouble, spread himself thin, and owned one of these banks, and told the FDIC he'd run the bank and they could run the government. And that got him 6 months in prison. Wow. So as a young kid, this is the golden child business guru that I idolized. And I was like, how in the world could that happen? What happened? And I did say this when we went to visit him, and I realized that we were now a prison family that went to see my dad. This will never happen to me. This will never happen to me. And so when Dad got out, he started building a company, but the company was in our name, Rhonda, Brent, and Tyler, because of his situation.
Got it.
So he didn't lose that through all of his assets in the process. So as we started building this company, I never really knew that I was going to go in the family company. But once I got out of law school, or out of college, I had done some sales over the summer and realized that I really liked that. So I went into it. And I went down to Texas. Dad was in St. Louis. That was our new state. So I got to build my own thing. And I realized, I got to pass or fail on my own. I wasn't the founder's son down there. So that's how that all happened. My brother came in later, and we grew a company into 22 states. We got recognized nationally because my brother and I had an idea that we wanted to do life stories to revolutionize the way people think about a life and remember a life. And we started bringing that to cemeteries, touch screens, internet. And we did about 17,000 life stories that you could go and meet your grandfather, your grandmother, and connect those, fill in that dash between the date of birth and death. Well, as I said before, Dad had this problem that when I said, you don't do the same thing again, to make the mistake, don't do it again. So we had a big, huge, gigantic reinsurance company, and they had gotten backwards in the market in 9/11. So they came to us and said, hey, we'd like to renegotiate your reinsurance agreement, which sounds, Karen, like that's something you should probably do. We cut a great contract. We should have probably been benevolent and said, sure. Well, Mr. Smart Guy, with our trustee attorney said, no, we don't have to do that. It's not in the contract. Well, that started a really ugly arbitration with Hanover Re, which is about as big as a country, and we weren't. And that ended up hitting our capital and surplus. And as we're going through this arbitration with this gigantic company, and then it started to get where they were leaking out information to the states we were in, and the regulatory world where there's smoke, there's fire. So how I got drawn into it, Karen, is that they said, hey, Brent, your dad can't go speak to these regulators because he's an ex-felon, but we really think that you could do a good job and going in and talking and telling the story of what we're doing with the business. I said, that's great, guys, but I don't know really what you're doing with the business. You're going to have to tell me. So they had to prep me into, how we were doing, what we were doing. And I wanted to save the day. I had the whole big cape mentality, I'm going to go in and save all the employees and all the people. I'm going to show my dad that I can do this. So I became the face of, going in and talking to regulators. I look back on that. Would I still do the same thing today after everything I've been through, losing everything and going to prison? It's a hard question because I still felt like that it was a thing that I needed to do. That, that was every meeting I was in, I had, the 400 people on my mind that I was trying. It wasn't just about me, it was their jobs, and they'd been with us 15 or 20 years. And you never get over that. When everything crashed and burned, to this day, that's something that you never get over, because I was really proud of what we were doing. I felt like, for the right intentions of, the old sales company was, you prearranged your funeral services so that you or your spouse or your partner or whatever could do it together so that they weren't left alone or with the kids, and they freeze the price. And it's a nice thing. We went through it with our own family. It was really hard to see that turned around to really look ugly, because there were so many people that were really dedicated to it. We had some really great people and had done it for a long time. So that's the thing that I hate, the bruise and the public, you lose your dignity and the respect and everything that went along with growing a business. And, there's always two sides to every story, but I've kind of moved past that. I know that my biggest mistake is that I didn't go, I had friends that were in the insurance business that told me, Brent, you need to get more involved with that. And I didn't. I was lazy with it. And, looking back, obviously I would have done that different, but, as it is, I would like to tell other people, trust is a wonderful thing, but don't get lazy with it. Be smart. And it's, even if it's your dad, be smart. If you love the guy, you idolize the guy, that doesn't mean he's perfect. So if there's something that you need, and my thing was, Karen, I didn't want to step into his world. He didn't step into mine, but I should have, and we should have had more conversations. But as it all ended up, it was a long drawn out deal. 97% of the people that get indicted plea. It's an incredible number, but it's an awful thing to see your name up against the United States of America. And
absolutely.
By the time you get there, you don't have anything to fight with. So, my family, it was an easy decision. The girls said, Dad, you can't go to trial. This has been a horrible experience. And why in the world you would think that you could go and win and we could lose you forever. So we had family discussions about it, and that was kind of the area where, Karen, I hit rock bottom and really came to the point where I thought I could just end it all. You know, that slippery slope where
Yep.
everything starts swimming, and the girls would be better off. Julie would be better off with a better start, clean start. And that was the night that I was going to plea the next day. And they happened to be out of town up in Nantucket, and I was going to come up there the next day. And I just had been drinking too much that night. And I decided I was going to get in the car, and it was either going to go into a tree or just leave the car on. And something hit me. It was like a lightning bolt. And thank God I wasn't too drunk that I passed out. But it was like a true lightning bolt. That, my God, Brent, what are you doing? You don't think this way. You're the half full guy, not the half empty. How weak could this look if you did this? And so from that moment on, I said, no matter what happens, no matter what I have to do, I'm going to use the experience and be a survivor and walk into whatever I've got to walk into. But I almost think you almost have to get to that point of the rock bottom to really get to your soul, to realize, okay, here, this is me, this is who I am. And now I've got to deal with this. I'm going to have to, grit up. I don't like it, but I'm going to walk through it. And that's really what happened. And
I hope people can relate to this no matter what their rock bottom is. I went through a divorce with my first husband. We knew we weren't right for each other day one. Okay.
Day one, you knew that.
Oh, I think on our first date, and yet we felt that we were connected. Okay. Yeah. And so we just progressed, but we progressed with blinders on. Yeah. And when the marriage fell apart, I took it all on me. What did I do wrong? And I'm a terrible person, and I'm a terrible mom, and whatever. Yeah. And I remember the night he actually walked out. My son was sleeping in his bedroom, and I walked in and I looked at him, and I thought, I wish I wasn't afraid to die, because I would just die. I don't know how I do it, but I would just do it. And I realized, because I didn't have a plan and I was afraid, I saved myself. Yeah. But that's how rock bottom it felt. And it was like, okay, now what can I do? And I remember the next morning I woke up, I called my husband at the time, and I said, you're right. The marriage is over. Mm-hmm. Let's figure out what to do. If anybody would have asked me, I thought I was a weakling because of it. But similar to you, I had to be shaken enough to say, hey, am I going to leave my parents behind, my brothers behind, and my son? How can I do that? Right. So kudos to you and your family, because obviously your girls knew what was best for all of you. Yeah. Even though it was going to be a terrible time, and I'm sure there are reflections of that on some days.
Yeah. And I think Carly had a quote, and I remember her posting this when we were pulling out of the parking lot after we'd gone through this whole experience. And I think it was, you never know how strong you are until strong is all you have.
Yep. Absolutely. So how long were you incarcerated?
So I had a 5-year sentence. So that was, I had probation to 5 years. So I was hoping for something in the, something less than 5 years. Yeah. So the whole thing was kind of a blur on the day of sentencing, because there was a huge crowd of people. It was like the town square thing that you see in Braveheart, where they finally pull William Wallace in and everybody's standing there. That's what you feel like. So I had probation of 5 years. My attorney was saying that, I'd be a year or 2 years, and I had all these letters and just, that was a strange thing too, Karen, the letter thing. I have never felt that whole Tom Sawyer thing where you get to see your own funeral. At my age, you don't get that ever. Right. That people will write letters for you talking about what you've met in their life and their friends would. I had these letters, and I took those letters with me to prison. Whenever I had a down day, I had those letters with me. But I had 5. So she sentenced me to the max of 5 years. In the federal system, you serve 84% of that time. So I had 84% of that time. There was also a program that was called RDAP, Residential Drug Addiction Program, I think is what it was called. But in my pre-sentencing report, the guy that was interviewing me, he said, "Brent, are you under a lot of stress?" And I said, "Yes."
Yeah,
He
yes.
said, "Do you drink to relieve your stress?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Are you drinking daily to relieve your stress?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, he said, I'm going to recommend this program." And he said, "You have to go, it's as a recommendation, but you have to go once you're in the prison to talk to the Dr. Wells who puts you into this program. But if you get in, you can get a year off. It's a 9-month program that you get into." So that was one of my 6 things when I wrote down that night, is I've got to figure out how to get into this program.
Right.
After, I think 9 months after I'd been there, I was able to get into that program. And so I earned a year off. So I actually served 3 years of the 60 months. And, I felt very much gratitude that I was able to get into that program. And I got to tell you, the program, it was a tough program. There's 100 guys, and you lived in a different dorm when you were going through it. But it was, I saw things in there that you don't usually see in a hardcore environment. You had to make these readiness statements when you first started. How did your experience affect your family and so on? And I remember one of the tough guys got up there and he was reading and he started crying, which you don't cry in prison. This is just in this little cold band room
Right.
that we're in, that we're all huddled in. And I remember a friend of mine, Kimbrick Jones, got up and he read that for him. And I thought, this is something different's going on here. So, and we had our graduation ceremony, and they asked me to speak to represent our group. And it meant something to me. It really did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you found that even though prison is not where anybody wants to be, that prison, there's a lot of tough guys there, that there is a soft side to many of them.
There is. I had my first bunkmate, Romo. In fact, I'm going to have him on my podcast Thursday night. Very interesting guy. He was a shot caller for the Texas Homeboys, and he was a stout boxer. I mean, he looked the part, but he was such a nice guy. And from the minute I met him, he helped me from, how do you do your bed military style. And he introduced me to some other guys that would help me get a prison job. And he looked out after me. So these stereotypes that we have of some people, when you're in this type of environment, everybody comes in alone on your own. There's no, you just are who you are.
Right.
And you find out different things about different people. When you live in that environment, it's so primitive that your old stereotypes are kind of washed away, and you just accept things for what they are. And the way they are different than maybe you would have perceived them from the outside.
And I'm sure people have said to you, you don't look like somebody who would go to prison.
Well, I had that said to me when I met Romo. He said, "You've not been here before." I know that. Yeah, that was that whole thing. For me, that first thing of just going into the walls of the prison. Julie and I drove the night before just to try to see if we could see anything. and we were up on the hill, and it was just, the sun was going down. I could see the guys that were walking the fence, and the lights were on. So you could kind of see the guys inside there, kind of in their, the D block and the C
Right.
block. And I didn't say this to Julie, but I was thinking, oh my God, I'm actually going to be beyond that fence tomorrow night in one of those rooms. And it was such a like spinning thought that I couldn't unspin that thought. And then when I walked in there, it was the same thing. Oh my God, I am inside a federal prison. I'm in this world. These things that you see and think about, or in the movies and whatever, you're walking in and they're giving you your stuff, and you have just surrendered your freedom forever long you have there, but it's going to be a while. And the magnitude and the bigness of that for your mind in that first, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours is really something.
Well, it's interesting at the beginning, you brought up the Shawshank Redemption, because I decided to go back for my master's degree in 2010. And one of the things I had to do, I was told I had to watch Shawshank Redemption, and I had to just do a mini description of what I thought it meant, like a paragraph. My next class, I had to keep expanding upon it. Watch it again. Do you feel yourself walking into the prison? And that was not a movie that I would have watched if it had not been an assignment.
Yeah.
But I ended up watching it 6 times for this class. And each time that they walked into the prison, I felt I was walking in.
Yeah.
My husband would walk in while I was watching it, and he'd make the comment, "You've seen that already." Like
you've already seen this.
No, I have to watch it differently. Yeah. But it made me realize basically what you were talking about, the night before, looking and saying, oh my God, I'm free right now.
Yeah.
But as soon as I walk in there, that's gone.
Yeah.
And did you also feel, I know you said you wanted to take control, you wrote these 6 things down, but was there ever a time that you were afraid that even though you were trying to take control, somebody could take that away from you and make it bad for you? Absolutely.
That was the thing, that you almost are play acting that you're in control, because you're never in control in prison. These weird things that you do. And there's also these weird things that happen in prison. Like, everybody sits in the same spot for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. It's a strange thing, but that's their control. I'm going to sit here. This is where I watch TV. I'm going to sit here, and this is where I watch movies. I'm going to sit here, and this is me. I have control of this. At any given time, they can get on the intercom and they can tell you to hit lockdown, and you don't know. And the first thing you find out of prison, you never know, because they don't tell you anything. So you just always are just told where to go or what to do. At any moment, you don't have control. And you have, that's a thing that when you get out of prison, it takes a while to unravel from that. I think it took me a good year to seem like, okay, I'm all right. I'm not looking around and acting kind of, but the other part of that is that when you get out of prison, you don't want people to think you're different. I feared that my kids or Julie or my friends would think, oh my God, he's turned into some kind of prison creature. So you're not quite, you're trying to act like, I'm excited, and you are. That's the thing. You're so excited not to be there.
Right.
But you're also trying to jump back into society that moved on, and your world, actually, they stopped the clock. Yep. So you're moving in and jumping into a moving car and trying to act normal. This is all still Brent. I'm still Brent, but inside, like, oh my God, there's a lot going on out here. It's moving really fast. I hope nobody thinks that I've freaked out, because I feel freaked out. And you feel that way when you go in, how do I get set up? How do I start living in this environment? So going in and coming out, there's like weird thing of the setup world in your mind that you've got to get back with.
So I don't want you to give too much away about your podcast Thursday night, but have you been in touch regularly with him?
Off and on. There's a few guys that I've stayed in touch with. So Romo's somebody that off and on I've stayed in touch with. I like what he's doing with his life. He's a boxing instructor up in South Bend, Indiana. And so I think, he's on the straight and narrow, and Romo always struggles. So I see that, I hear it when he talks, but you want to be on his side. You want to jump on his side because he's got a good heart. So I think his story will be interesting. Even from my side, I had a interview yesterday on my podcast with a guy that helped me out. Interestingly enough, he actually, within the first hour, Romo introduced me to him, and he had gone to my high school. He was 8 years older and had played basketball, which I had done. You don't expect that in prison, like, somebody in some way, and we did. But Jim, we talked about some things yesterday on the podcast, even though that we talked a lot when we were in together, that we got a little bit deeper on, like talking about his hardest day and how he dealt with that. So, yeah, I think that's why I'm excited about talking to these guys in a different environment, talking about before prison and then in prison and out of prison, because everybody's got a different story and a different way that they handle it.
So how can we find your podcast?
So the podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, and something else. But if you type in Nightmare Success in and out, I'd love to have you follow, because then it'll alert you when I said something. Yes. But I've got 2 teasers and a trailer on there right now. And then I dropped the first of the 3 interviews that I've done this week. So I'm excited about it.
Well, we're excited about it as well. We're glad that you are back home. We're glad that you have that you have a support system. And a couple very important things that you brought up is that yes, it's great to have trust in people, but we have to be careful who we trust. And sadly, in this world, it's even more so. It's really easy to follow somebody down the wrong path, and keep your eyes open, ask questions, and
good points.
Let's just make it a safer world. I'm going to keep following you, and I'm interested in listening to both of yesterday's podcast and the one coming up tomorrow, now that we all know you. So thank you so much.
Karen, thank you so much for having me as a guest. I appreciate it.
Have a great day now. Bye-bye.